I am Steve Black. I'm a librarian here. Let me give you a little bit of background. I was raised nominally in the United Methodist Church, and in the congregation that my family went to, it was customary at age 14 to go through a confirmation process, where you go through some classes where you really know what you're supposed to believe as a United Methodist, and then you pledge yourself to believing this. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And my parents said, well, your brothers did it. My older brothers did it. We'd really like you to do this. I said, no, I'm not going to, because I don't actually believe what you have to pledge yourself to believe. And my mom said, well, you know, you can just do the process, and then if you change your mind later, that's okay. And I was just, you know, as a 14-year-old, I was just appalled by that idea, because I'd seen the ceremony. My older brothers had gone through it, and you're pledging yourself for your entire life to believing certain things. My parents weren't happy, but they accepted my decision. And after that, you know, I'd been a fairly regular churchgoer and enjoyed the social aspects. And unfortunately, that kind of ended. I had a normal teenage life and went on doing other things without being a churchgoer. I went to Florida State University as an undergrad, and my first major was hotel and restaurant administration. I thought the world's greatest thing would be to, like, manage a resort in the Caribbean or whatever. And the first year at Florida State was fine. I enjoyed the liberal education classes. And then my sophomore year, you know, these business classes, you know, with 400 or 500 people, and I really hated it. And I was spending my time, instead of studying what I was supposed to be studying, reading about religion and cosmology. And a lot of the big questions in life were really on my mind. Really, what does it mean to be? If the universe is infinite, what happened before the Big Bang? I also was really in touch with the fact that many people are devout Christians, and for devout Christians, Jesus and God are the most real things there are. So I thought a lot about, well, what is reality? And is there such a thing as truth with a capital T? So, since I was spending all of my time thinking about questions like that and related questions, I changed my major to humanities with a minor in religious studies and finished my degree. Did a year overseas in Bonn, Germany, which is a really good part of my education. And then after I graduated, I really didn't have any particular plans, moved back home with my parents, the classic thing, you know, I have a humanities degree, do you want fries with that? I mean, I was literally a waiter asking if you want fries with that. So anyway, but all those questions were still on my mind. And, you know, I'd written notes and I'd taken classes on sociology of religion and philosophy of religion and various things. And there was no one, like, body of belief or any one book that I was really taken by. So I just had it in my head that I really wanted to just think it through on my own and come up with ideas of my own, you know, based on things that I'd read. I had this idea of I would go on an adventure and take photographs and then take all the notes and everything and put it into something. And I did. I was 23 years old, and this is it, Trip on a Lake. This is an expression of my opinion to be taken as you wish. It is the product of my trip on a lake from September 11th through October 1st, 1983. Across the lake are others, but my trip doesn't involve them. They have their purposes for being here, and I have mine. I want to unify my ideas. Water is to rock as my ideas are to the world. At night, I see the universe. Imagine, the universe is infinite and one. Some who claim to know believe the universe had a beginning in time, this being the Big Bang. In reality, an infinite number of Big Bangs occur. Each bang produces an expanding galaxy system. In their time, galaxies converge on counterparts from other bangs, forming great masses that detonate as new bangs. Galaxies exist in the space and time between bangs. If the speed of light were infinity or null, space, time, and distance would not exist. The universe oscillates between the impossible states of pure energy and pure matter because of the limiting speed of relations, null, and the speed of light. I mostly just want to read this, but I want to pause right here. The next section, I think it helps to know that what I was trying to wrap my brain around was a description of reality that fit both atoms and molecules and chairs and tables and people and Colgate, but also encompassed belief in Jesus, religious beliefs, other ideas that have a reality in the world but aren't tangible. So anyway, this next section, it was my trying to grapple with that. So reality exists in nodes. A reality node is anything which is related to. Quantity is the measure of reality nodes. Every reality node creates a sphere of influence through time. Every reality node is a convergence of spheres of influence. All things follow the paths of reality node spheres of influence. Do not underestimate waves. Existence requires both nodes and relationships. Quality is the measure of relations among nodes. Imagine the number of relations in our limited world. From the point of any one reality node, only the present exists. The universe is differentiated because the present is unique to every reality node. Relation takes time. The past exists as stable bits of reality that have retained their form. The future exists as an extrapolation of the present. Everything has a complex history of relationships of its objects. Anything's history is a series of fulfilled possibilities. But the world is more than a game of chance. In addition to quantity and quality, there is truth. Truth guides all through the infinite complexity. Truth is universal, consistent, and open. Truth contains and binds beauty, good, and love. Beauty is true form. Good is true action. Love is true emotion. As with the speed of light, truth cares not what things do. It just limits what can be done. Absolute truth is as unobtainable as pure energy or pure matter or pure idea. It is to be eternally strived for but never known. I cannot know much truth because truths are distorted by perception, interpretation, and expression. Every step I take in life will affect its destination as my body, actions, and emotions influence the world. My influence continues without me beyond my control, on, losing definition as it goes. Whatever control I have over my influence will end with my death, but my sphere of influence may continue on. It's a big world, and I'm only one, but I am one. Be and know one, that's it. That's the end. So, I can talk some about how my thinking has evolved in the 36 years since I put that together, but I would first really, any questions, comments that you have, I would love to entertain at this point. Anyone? Yes?
What does a reality node mean?
anything that's related to. So I was thinking, you know, a chair is a reality node, you're a reality node, I'm a reality node, but it can also be an idea, some abstract idea. So again, that's what I was trying to struggle with, was coming up with an ontology, a theory of being, a philosophy of being that incorporated both material things and non-material things like ideas. Well, I'll talk a little bit then about how my thinking has evolved. Again, that was 36 years ago. My current thinking kind of centers around 3 ideas. I should have gotten a bigger one. First is that infinity is. It's not only that the universe is infinite. I have come to believe that infinity itself as infinity exists, which seems innocuous, but it's not. Actually, it can be important. Oh, excuse me. I did this backwards. Sorry. The thing that really hasn't changed in my thinking over the years is the whole thing of something can't exist if it's not in relation to something else. And there's both internal relations, like inside your body, we have 100 billion brain cells, and you know everything's interacting with everything else, and we exist because there's all these relationships, not only between us and the world, but within our own bodies. And I don't think anything can exist without being in relation with something else. And the thing I've come to believe just in the last couple of years, and this is a little bit out there, but let me try to explain it, is that consciousness is relation with infinity. Now, you know, the light and the sound that are reaching you are a little out of sync, and, you know, the reaction time is 0.4 seconds. And there's everything that happens in your body is actually not perfectly synced up, but your mind creates this illusion of it being in the moment. There's a now that's your consciousness. And that wouldn't be possible if you couldn't transcend the limits on all of those relations. Everything would be all out of sync, but your mind transcends that. So what I think is that consciousness is possible because we can transcend the physical and tap into the infinite, which has no limit. So infinity has no time, no scale. It's a perfect unity throughout everything. So I think we're tapping into that. Another way we do it is through memory. You know, I've got this really distinct memory. When I was not quite 4 years old, we had a dachshund that had this ability to climb the chain link fence. And one night he climbed the chain link fence, ran out in the road, and got killed. And the driver felt terrible about it, told my dad about it. So anyway, the poor dog was dead, and my brothers and I were peppering my parents with questions like, well, you know, what is dog heaven? What happened to Floppy? Where did he go? Will I see him later? And all, you know, all these questions. I don't really remember exactly how they struggled to try to answer those questions, but I remember lying in bed around 4 years old and really thinking about what is heaven and all these things. You know, so it's a really distinct memory for me, and that was 1,000 miles and 56 years ago, but I can conjure it right now. Okay, so in your memories, you can transcend the moment and go back in time and retrieve something, and it's part of the now of your consciousness. And the third way that we tap into infinity with consciousness is with our imaginations. We can picture things in the future. Authors can make up things like Star Wars and Star Trek, and Harry Potter can seem real, and all of these things. And I think that all of those abilities to transcend the present, memory and imagination, are because we're tapping into the infinite, and that's what consciousness is. So now, does that spur any questions or comments or things that you'd like to talk about?
Um,
Go ahead. Yeah, Ferdinand, thanks.
One question is, I mean, this sounds like a pretty abstract metaphysics, and so my question is two-pronged. One is, you said you were trying to, when you started this whole project many years ago, you wanted to sort of bring together your individual, personal, and kind of abstract thinking with, to some extent, the revealed truth of Christianity. So how do you see that relationship? Is this just a more general form of what Christianity does in detail for you? And the other question is, how does all of that relate to everyday living? I mean, this is so abstract. What does that mean for what you do or don't do and experience in everyday life?
Those are two really big questions. Let me address the second one first. In terms of how does it relate to everyday life, it is very abstract. But, I mean, in Trip on a Lake, I say that truth is universal, consistent, and open, and I do think that's still true, but truth is just the characteristics of infinity, is the way I've come to believe. So in terms of having a relation to my day-to-day living, is I do feel like I have a commitment to being universal and considering everything across time and being open to new ideas. So I think as a general rule of thumb, the universal, consistent, and open as a way of being truthful has been a somewhat helpful guide to me. Even though I'm far from perfect at it, it helps. And life itself is very messy, so a lot of times you've got conflicting things, so you can't always make a decision that's good for everything. As far as Christianity goes, I mean, I have not changed my mind. I'm not a Christian because I don't believe in the literalness of, you know, the resurrection of Christ, and I, as I said in this, I am very comfortable with the belief that when I'm dead, I'm personally gone, and that my afterlife is the impact that I've had during my life. And that afterlife is going on all the time. It's just whatever control I may have over it ends when I end. So, as long as I've remembered, I can never remember believing that heaven made sense. I just never made sense. So, the whole thing about Christ being my Savior has just never resonated with me personally. It's always been, save me from what? Because if it's just nothingness, what am I being saved from? But one of the things that's changed over the years is that I am much more empathetic and respectful of people who are believers, who do have a strong faith. Because I have a belief system, but it's very cold comfort. There's nothing in this set of beliefs to comfort the afflicted or help me get through an illness or something, you know, because I have this philosophy that's basically on our own, and this life is it, you know, so it's pretty cold comfort. Does that answer your questions okay? Yes.
So, I've been watching this, so I have a question for you. So, is infinity God?
That's kind of where my thinking has landed right now. If God is infinite, is infinity God? And I think basically that's the conclusion I've come to, but it doesn't mean there aren't unanswered questions. Because say that you accept that the universe is truly infinite, there's an infinite number of big bangs. You know, I went to a talk last week, apparently there's 10 million trillion planets in our visible universe that can support life. You know, so, you know, we're not the only conscious beings out there. But just accept that, you know, there was this infinite universe and infinite consciousness beings throughout the whole thing. Even if you accept that, it's like, where did the parameters come from? You know, like in cosmology, if it weren't for the gravity and the speed of light and the nuclear forces being just right, we wouldn't have the universe that we have. So where did those parameters come from? And then where did the stuff of the universe come from? You know, there's things that have to exist for them to be in relation with one another. So basically, yes, but that doesn't answer all the questions. There's still these unanswered.
So, being me, I wasn't looking for you to answer all the questions, only to ask a question. And so I'm going to go. So you said something about about your own existence, okay, this life is it, right? You said that consciousness is relation with infinity. So, my question is this: if there are if your children remember you and your grandchildren remember them and all right, that is a relationship of consciousness with infinity, yes? Okay.
And memory, yes.
And memory. So then what you're saying, in effect, is memory is the vehicle by which consciousness indefinitely relates with infinity.
It's one of the vehicles, yes. Yes.
So in that sense, you got as much afterlife as you had before. You're just not using mythic language around it.
The crux of that is whether you retain any kind of individual identity when you're not alive as a living being. And I fully understand that many, many, many folks believe in the eternity of the soul, and that this is just a manifestation of an individual soul that's infinite. And I just personally don't believe it, but I deeply respect people who do believe that. Yes?
I have a question about, it was briefly brought up, sort of, this infinity as God. Can you touch on why you don't explicitly say it that way, or if there is a reason?
Well, first of all, in 1983, my thinking hadn't evolved to that point yet. Actually, my level of comfort of saying that, yeah, that's what I believe, really just came to me in the last couple of years. So that's really my answer, that it's been a more recent evolution of my thinking. Yes?
This might be a dumb question, but like, why does existence require relation? Is it the fact that like why can't something just exist? Is it like the fact that something has to exist, or two things have to exist in order to acknowledge each other?
That's my thinking. That's my thinking. That, you know, hypothetically, if you had a singularity that was off in space somewhere that didn't have any relation to anything else, it would have no way of recognizing its own existence, and nothing would recognize its existence. So I know it's very abstract, but my thinking is really more rooted in the way the world actually works, because there's nothing that we can observe that's in perfect isolation. I mean, you know, like on the atomic level, atoms are made up of quarks and electrons and everything, and so there's, at some point, everything is somehow related to other things. I know it's pretty abstract and everything, and it's something that could definitely be questioned and pondered. I have my own personal beliefs, but they're open to being challenged, because I fully understand that my perspective, first of all, I'm a true heretic. You know, the motto here is everyone's a heretic to someone else, so I'm a heretic to everybody.
No, you're not. I know plenty of people like you.
Well, you know, it's really interesting. You know, it's funny that in higher education, it's perfectly acceptable to take the approach of, oh, I want to think this through on myself. I really want to critically analyze this, that, and the other. But outside of higher education, you know, I have had a number of life experiences where when people found out that I didn't believe what Christians are supposed to believe, they didn't want to have anything to do with me. It's happened to me several times. So it's, you know, it's not coincidental that I'm in higher education, because, you know, I think what you're learning here and what you're getting with your liberal education and how you go about finding truth with the way you're being taught to do it here at Colgate very much resonates with my own feeling of how you work through trying to arrive at truth. So, you know, I feel at home here. Other thoughts, questions? Anything about the trip itself? Yes.
Were you by yourself?
I was, yeah.
Where did you stay?
I camped. I had a tent. I didn't have any pictures here. If you open up the print to the very back page, There's a couple of pictures. There was a thunderstorm, and I parked underneath this little cliff thing, and it happened to be just where the water was coming down, so it filled the canoe. So the bottom picture kind of shows my stuff. I just camped wherever I could. It's a gorgeous place. Have any of you ever been to Lake Powell in Utah? You have? Well, how crowded was it? I think it's much more crowded than it was back then.
I was there last summer on like a geology trip, and we took a cruise kind of tour thing. But I think maybe because the area where we at, they didn't allow like swimming, but there was still like we drove by a little, not drove, but like a dock with just 20 or 30 like giant houseboat kind of things.
My understanding is it's much more crowded than it was when I was there. And even when I was there were quite a few people in houseboats. Even though summer was over, it was late. It was September through early October that I went. So I saw a lot of people. Yes, I was by myself, but I encountered people pretty regularly. I mean, all of the good camping spots, there would be other people there and whatnot. So it wasn't that isolated. Yes?
Okay. I was going to say, don't you find it somewhat ironic that, like, you've decided to exist, things need to relate to each other, so to decide that you go as far away from people as you can?
That's a really good point. Yeah, it's a really good point. But it was, it was kind of a retreat. Yeah, it was a retreat of sorts to try to get my thoughts together and take the pictures and everything. But it's interesting because it's more of an existential thing that everything is in relation to everything else. I personally am very comfortable being out on my own. If I'm in nature, if you put me in a city, I go crazy in an hour. But if you put me out in nature, I can go a week without talking to anybody and be perfectly fine about it. But all of that's rooted in solid relationships I've had with my family and others. Yes, Barry.
Is relationship limited to relationship with people? Because
No.
it seems to me what you did, right, you muted your relationship with people to heighten your relationship with everything else.
Yeah.
You still take pictures?
Not so much, unfortunately. Sometimes I get the itch to go out again, but back in the day, it was slide film. It was film, so I had no idea what the pictures looked like until weeks after the trip was entirely over, and I'd been able to, get the photos back from the lab. You had something else, Ferdinand?
Yeah, you talked about your journey from hotel management to the humanities and religion, and then I guess there's a sequel to that, onto library science and libraries. I wonder if you would like to talk a little more about that, and also what a library. I think the library here is one of the undersung things at Kogan. People go there, bring their laptop, log onto JSTOR or whatever, and do their work. But what a library can actually do for exploring, since not everybody can go to Lake Powell. But for me, library can be something like a Lake Powell of the mind. So for people who want to explore big questions of meaning and life and whatever,
it's a good fit for me. I was a high school social studies teacher for 5 years before deciding to become a librarian, which was really good background for being a librarian, actually. And I enjoyed teaching pretty well, but I just didn't want to do it for my entire career. So I switched to librarianship, and it's been a good fit for me. Being a librarian and being in higher education fits my perspective on things pretty well. It's a pretty good fit. I don't know if you noticed one of these pictures. You didn't have a way of noticing with a thing like this. But the way I showed you, it kind of looks like a little man with a bow tie with his hands out to the side. Look at it upside down. Looks like a mask, doesn't it? Yeah. So, anyway, it was a fun trip. I did get caught in some pretty wicked thunderstorms. I mean, you can tell from the lightning shots, but and one time it was a little bit scary, but for the most part, it was a really nice trip. Yes, Mark?
It seems that you must have been thinking and reading about this before, and I can't imagine that you didn't think and read about it afterward.
Right.
So you've captured a point in time where you're kind of consolidating your beliefs, and now you've had a long time since, presumably, to read and study. What are the preceding texts or writers or whatever, and who are the subsequent ones that you?
Yeah. Well, William James's Varieties of Religious Experience has been one, especially the chapters on mysticism and the descriptions of people's mystical relationships I've found interesting. One of the books that influenced me a lot before, and I've reread once, was that Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that book really resonated with me. I really liked that one. I'm having trouble remembering the authors. They're particularly in sociology of religion. That class impacted me a lot. It was Feuerbach and Weber, and I can't remember who the other main authors were. But Mark, even though I think about things, and sometimes we'll read religious texts and philosophy, I'm much, much more into history now, and just I sometimes think about these abstract things, but nowadays I'm much more focused on how to make my day-to-day life work, and so I'm not really that steeped in the literature. Yes, Seth.
Do you, a lot of the terms that you use and the way that you talk kind of cosmologically does call to mind a lot of the ideas of Buddhism. And I wonder if when you're thinking about the materiality of existence and the idea of relationships, you kind of perceive or conceive of an overarching unity of things, and that perhaps real existence is beyond relationships.
I still struggle with that, because I do think that infinity itself is the overarching. But I think we're separate from it, and there's this paradox. You can't be conscious without being a living being, and we're tapped into infinity, but infinity is a pure unity that's utterly separate from us. I mean, from our perspective as living beings, infinity is pure nothingness, and yet it's there. So, Buddhism and Taoism, have been interesting to me, but I don't buy it lock, stock, and barrel. I may have a tendency, that's an interesting idea, that's an interesting idea. We've lost our crowd, but thank you all so very much. I really appreciated the opportunity.